People spread on social media that Russia had used an unknown chemical-like weapon. Mariupol. Russia cannot take Mariupol, and probably against this background, it has decided to use chemical weapons. It no longer makes sense to talk about the meanness and criminality of what Russia is using in this war because it already looks like a conversation in the air. One question arises. Was it not clear to those planning military operations that Russia would use 100% chemical weapons? And then all these tanks, Bayraktari, and other high-precision, so-called weapons will be useless? Sometimes you wonder how generals and politicians fly in the clouds about Russia's meanness, its rottenness in the use of all prohibited weapons. But it has been used for a long time, everywhere, in Chechnya and Syria. And where did the Ukrainian authorities and Ukrainian generals look? And where did the people look? Why didn't he push them and force them to take action? Did they hope in God, or a miracle, or how to understand it all? Well, the train is already gone. It's too late because February 24 is over. If people are telling the truth on social networks, Russia is vilely trying to drive the defenders of Mariupol out of their positions. Many of them may have difficulty breathing and other symptoms of poisoning. The difficulty is that it is difficult for the Ukrainian military to defend itself against chemical attacks. Because the city's infrastructure has been destroyed. There is almost nowhere to hide, there are few airtight places where you can hide from the gas. Civilians will be even more dangerous. Authorities left Mariupol because all defense forces were sent to Kiev. Kiev was defended because there was a government. But Mariupol drew the whole main blow. And now people are just being destroyed one by one. It is necessary to record the facts of the use of chemical weapons, if they really were. Ukraine has renounced all weapons that were not conventional. But Russia is not playing by the rules. Or outside the rules. It's like going with a slingshot to the occupier, who throws grenades to the right and left. The occupiers use mines everywhere, the sunshine system. Phosphorus bombs, and so it gradually comes to chemical weapons. If the Ukrainian government and military generals could not foresee such obvious things that Russia, firstly, has all this arsenal, and secondly, is not prepared to use all these weapons, the only protection for Ukrainians are Western countries, which have promised to react harshly. Russia's use of chemical weapons. But they will pretend that nothing has happened, so it is important to gather evidence of Russia's use of any weapons prohibited by international treaties of inhumane weapons. Russia vilely misses everything it can physically reach. If the Ukrainians acted in the same way, meaning the use of prohibited weapons against the occupiers, Ukraine would have already won this war. And they know that Ukraine will never use this type of weapon because Ukraine has chosen the path of international law and even renounced nuclear weapons to make the world safer. Russia is reveling in its impunity. And they laugh at Ukrainians, considering themselves the masters of meanness. They revel in Ukraine's compliance with international law. As everyone sees, compliance with international law is deadly. And for that people die every day. For adhering to these damn papers, which set out the conventions and other rules of warfare, while Nazi Russia wanted to sneeze at all these documents. If Ukrainians are suffering under international law, then the West must make even greater efforts to arm Ukraine to the teeth so that this vile weapon used by Russia will be meaningless and useless to it. And even the West must respond quickly. Otherwise, each country, looking at what is happening in Ukraine, will think about starting to revive those types of banned weapons that were banned a long time ago. And which guarantee them protection from such crazy countries as Russia. And which will protect them from genocide. This must not allow the world to become anarchy, to cease to adhere to the international treaties, and, as a result, for the international treaties to cease to operate. In this regard, the measure urgently needs to respond harshly to Russia's use of banned weapons of mass destruction and punish it as sanctions and even greater and massive arms supplies as soon as possible. To unblock Mariupol and save people from suffering from Russia's use of phosphorus bombs and more. By the way, Russia has used phosphorus bombs many times. And where is the reaction?